Absolutely not. I think that this morning's debate was a very one-sided affair.
Why?
The protests have been going on since April, and as your own TV clip earlier showed, as many of the images that we've seen have showed, many of these protesters are armed, they have homemade mortars, they throw Molotov cocktails. There have been armed clashes between paramilitaries who attacked a base in August at Carabobo. There was a helicopter grenade attack on the Supreme Court. Everybody's talking as if these are peaceful protests, but they're not. And I don't deny that there have been police officers who've killed protesters, and those police officers have been arrested and charged.
Right.
But there's violence on both sides, and everybody's talking as if the opposition are peaceful.
Right. Is it the opposition who have become more violent as a result, as the UN Human Rights Watch have actually said, because people in Venezuela are starving? Opposition politicians and protesters are being beaten, tortured, jailed and killed, and it's being done by Maduro's government with impunity.
I don't think that's the case at all. Opposition
So are you
protesters
saying
have
that the Human
burned
Rights
food
Watch
depots.
are wrong? I mean, these are official statements from the Human Rights Watch, who are now preparing their statements for the Human Rights Council in Geneva, and that is their report.
Yes, I think it's a very one-sided report. The majority of deaths in the Venezuelan protests have not been caused by security forces, and where security forces have been involved, they have been arrested, they have been tried, police officers have been jailed for those incidents. This is a violent uprising. It's one of a succession of violent uprisings by the Venezuelan right, an attempt to overthrow the Venezuelan presidency before elections next year. If they were so confident that the president is unpopular, why can't they wait and win the election next year against the president?
Right, Graham Jones, what do you say about holding a one-sided debate that hasn't fairly reflected the violence, says Ben Chaco, on the side of the protesters?
I think there's been an opportunity for those that take that particular view of the Morning Star. I don't think there's many people who hold that view to come into Parliament. Some people signed early day motions. If you're sympathetic, there's 650 MPs. There's plenty of opportunity for the Venezuelan solidarity movement to garner the support of MPs to come and debate. And the fact that they weren't there probably speaks volumes about what's right and what's wrong.
Right, so is it really responsible for the Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, who has heaped praise, certainly on Maduro's regime in 2014, 2015, saying that actually it had success in policy areas like health and education, saying that these were a cause for celebration?
I think the current situation is not a cause for celebration. I don't think there's anybody that would agree with that, and I've not heard Jeremy say anything to the extent that it supports what's going on currently in Venezuela.
Well, he did in 2015. Should he just cut his links with any campaign that Maduro is involved in Venezuela?
Well, I think he should, and I'm not aware that he has any links with the current campaign or the current regime or any campaigning group in the United Kingdom. As far as I'm concerned, it's a very clear case that this is a militaristic, authoritarian regime, communist regime. I'm not surprised the Morning Star supports it, and that is undermining the lives of people in Venezuela. Right.
I mean, in terms of the economy, I mean, it has collapsed, Ben Chaco, which I again say and put to you, that is why people have taken to protesting. The economy has collapsed, inflation has soared, people are starving. I mean, there's anecdotal reports of people scavenging in bins, eating their own pets. Really, can you be surprised by the level of protest? People aren't prepared to wait, as you said, for another year for elections, and they've already been accused, the Maduro regime, of rigging the elections that have happened.
Well, I think that's an absolutely absurd allegation that those constituent assembly elections were rigged. The opposition boycotted those elections, so naturally they didn't do very well if they didn't stand in the first place. That constituent assembly was summoned because of this economic crisis, because there is an economic crisis.
And whose fault is the economic crisis?
The collapse in oil prices, as Jeremy said earlier.
And who was in charge of Venezuela in terms of squandering the oil as a precious resource in Venezuela?
Well, do you believe that when a government makes had mistakes in its economic policy, that then gives a right to the opposition to violently overthrow that government? No, it doesn't. The opposition, since winning a majority in the National Assembly, which they did in 2015,
but
elections which were internationally, they won the majority in those elections, so I don't see why they would claim that those were rigged. Since then, there has been the opposition controlling the parliament in Venezuela, the presidency controlled by Maduro, and they have failed to work together. So this Constituent Assembly was summoned as an attempt to get through that deadlock. The opposition boycotted those talks. The opposition has boycotted the Constituent Assembly. They don't want to move forward on this. They don't want dialogue.
Right.
Instead, they want to take to the streets to attack the police, to overthrow the regime.
Your party made a lot of this over the summer. I mean, what evidence is there to suggest that a Labour government would follow any of the policies of the Venezuelan regime?
Well, there seems to be a sneaking admiration on the part of Jeremy Corbyn.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily sneaking.
Thank you. I think you make my point. I think that there's lots of evidence that Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell, the people running the Labour Party, actually have seen the Venezuelan government as a model for economic policy. Now, the fact that the Venezuelan government has destroyed the economy of a country that should have been one of the wealthiest countries in South America and has therefore made the lives of its people a misery really ought to make people pause for thought and reflect on whether people like Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell are really people who could ever be trusted with the economy of our own country.
Right, and should the government be working harder with the opposition parties then in Venezuela to do something about it?
Well, I think we should make it very clear that we deprecate any government that fails to allow proper political freedom in the way that it does, and the awful way in which it's dealing with the protesters. And I wouldn't advocate violent protest, but I think we have to condemn the complete lack of political freedom in Venezuela. But we also have to be realistic about what we can do about it. The starting point has to be that we don't give them any succour, we don't give them support, we don't suggest that there's a body of opinion in the United Kingdom of any significance that is on their side.
All right, gentlemen, thank you both very much.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.